I never imagined that one day, 10 years of hiding would unravel in a single instant. It wasn't because I wanted it to, and it certainly wasn't planned. It started like any ordinary Saturday morning. I woke up early, sunlight spilling across the floor, the faint hum of traffic outside my apartment. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the neatly folded dress on the chair, the soft silk shimmering in the morning light. It had been with me for almost a decade, a quiet secret that held pieces of who I was, who I had been, and who I wanted to be when no one was watching. Cross-dressing had never been a statement of rebellion or fantasy for me. It was my way of expressing a part of myself that didn't fit neatly into the world's expectations. My first memory of it goes back to high school, sneaking into my sister's closet while she was at school, feeling the strange, thrilling calm of slipping into her clothes. I would stare at myself in the mirror for hours, tracing the curve of a sleeve, the fall of a skirt, the way the fabric felt against my skin. I felt whole, alive, and scared, so deeply scared that anyone finding out would destroy everything. By the time I graduated, I had perfected the art of secrecy. My apartment became a sanctuary. Every weekend, I would transform in solitude, selecting outfits carefully, doing my makeup with trembling hands, practicing voices and gestures in front of the mirror. I created a persona, not because I wanted to hide from myself, but because the world had never made space for it. And for 10 years, I managed to keep it hidden. Friends, family, co-workers, they only saw me as the person I had built for public consumption. Neat, professional, controlled. Inside, though, I was always both of me, a dual existence suspended between fear and longing. Until that morning. I had just slipped into a flowing emerald dress, one that made me feel radiant, confident in ways I couldn't describe. I had curled my hair, applied soft makeup, and was practicing a new walk in my tiny living room when my phone buzzed. A notification, a message from a friend who was visiting unexpectedly. I froze. My heart pounded. I knew I couldn't answer without revealing myself. I tried to silence it, but the vibration was relentless. And then it happened. The door clicked. I didn't hear the knock because my pulse had drowned out everything. And suddenly, there she was, my roommate, my closest friend, standing in the doorway. Her eyes widened. For a split second, nothing moved. The dress, the heels, my carefully applied lipstick, everything was laid bare. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like someone had pulled the rug from under me. I didn't know anyone would be home, I stammered, words tripping over themselves. She blinked, then stepped inside, not with judgment, not with mockery, but with an incredulous softness I couldn't place. "You've been hiding this, for 10 years, she asked, almost whispering. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I didn't want anyone to know. I was afraid. For a moment, I expected her to laugh, to call me crazy, or to leave. But she didn't. She sat down across from me, quiet, studying me. The silence was terrifying, suffocating, and yet strangely tender. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally said, voice gentle. "I didn't think you'd understand." "I didn't even understand it myself for a long time," I admitted. Her expression softened further. "I think I do. You're brave. You've carried this alone for so long, hiding who you really are. That's a lot." I couldn't breathe. Relief and shame collided, twisting in my chest. All those years of sneaking, of fear, of rehearsing explanations for the world, suddenly seemed both meaningless and precious. I had been living a half-life, and for the first time in 10 years, someone had seen me fully and still cared. From that moment, everything shifted. She didn't leave, she stayed. She asked questions, listened, and even laughed with me at the absurdity of my careful routines, the tiny rituals I had crafted to feel right in a world that never expected me to be. For the first time, I didn't have to hide. But the world outside wasn't ready yet. A few weeks later, a package arrived at my building. A courier mix-up had left my identity exposed in ways I hadn't imagined. Letters, photographs, personal notes. I was terrified. The fear from that morning, multiplied tenfold, consumed me. I could feel every heartbeat like a drum in a quiet room. I didn't know what to do. I thought about burning the dress, the makeup, everything that had ever made me feel like myself. I wanted to disappear, to erase 10 years of memories, of identity. And then I remembered her words, my friend's calm, unwavering presence when she had seen me fully. I realized that hiding had cost me more than I could measure. It had cost me peace, love, moments of pure authenticity. And if I allowed fear to dictate the rest of my life, I would lose even more. I took a deep breath and made a choice. I would confront it. I would tell my family, my closest friends, anyone who mattered. Not as an apology, not as a plea, but as the truth of who I am. The first conversation was the hardest. My parents were shocked, hurt, confused. But they were also willing to listen, to try to understand. My mother cried, held my hand, and whispered that she loved me no matter what. My father was silent for hours, but when he finally spoke, he said something I'll never forget. I don't fully understand, but I see you. And I want to. Every conversation after that carried a weight, a risk, and yet a liberation I hadn't known I could feel. Doors I never dared approach opened. Friendships deepened. Some relationships shifted, yes, but in ways that taught me about acceptance and boundaries. And through it all, I kept the dress, the emerald dress, the first one I ever loved. It became a symbol, not of secrecy, but of courage, of survival, of reclaiming joy. A year later, I stood in front of the mirror, dressed carefully as I had done for 10 years, but this time there was no fear. I smiled at myself, fully. Not hiding, not ashamed, not apologetic. Just me, finally, in all my complexity. And that's the lesson I want to share. Hiding might feel safe, but it eats away at your soul. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's living anyway, embracing who you are, even when the world might not understand. 10 years of secrecy ended in a moment, but the freedom I found afterward has no measure. I tell this story not because I want sympathy or applause, but because maybe someone out there is hiding, afraid to be seen. To you, I want to say, it's terrifying. It's messy. But it's also beautiful. And when you step into the light, when you let yourself be seen, you might just find that the world isn't as unkind as you feared. That emerald dress still hangs in my apartment, and every time I see it, I remember the fear, the secrecy, the trembling excitement of a decade past, and the courage it took to finally live. And I smile, because I survived. I lived. And I am finally free. After that first year of slowly revealing myself to the people I cared about, life began to feel different, almost surreal. I still remember the first time I stepped out in public, dressed as I truly wanted to be, without hiding in the shadows. It was a late afternoon, the sun low and soft, painting everything gold. I wore a simple lavender dress, my hair falling loosely around my shoulders, and I held my breath as I walked toward the cafe where my friend had agreed to meet me. Every step felt like a heartbeat amplified, like the world was noticing me in a way it had never done before. People passed by, glancing, but mostly just continuing their day. There were no gasps, no stares of judgment, just ordinary life. And in that ordinary life, I finally found myself reflected. When I saw my friend waiting at our usual table, she jumped up, smiled, and waved. "You look amazing," she said, and I felt my chest loosen. The weight of 10 years of secrecy didn't vanish entirely, but it thinned. It was a gentle, powerful reminder that authenticity had its own quiet strength. Over the next few months, I began documenting my journey, not for fame, not for anyone else, but for me. I wrote late at night, sitting cross-legged on the floor in my apartment, fingers trembling over the keyboard. I described the small joys, the way a skirt twirled just right, the warmth of soft fabric on my skin, the thrill of putting on makeup in the morning light. And I wrote about the fear, too. The fear of rejection, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear that everything I had built could crumble with one careless glance. One evening, as I was typing, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. She had always been cautious around me after my initial revelation, unsure how to approach the subject. But that night, she sent a single line, "I want to understand. Can we talk?" My heart jumped. I hadn't expected this. My hands shook as I typed back, agreeing. When she arrived, I felt a familiar rush of nerves. My apartment, once my private sanctuary, now became a stage for vulnerability. I invited her to sit, offered her tea, and waited. And then, as she took a sip, she asked, softly, "What made you afraid for so long?" I took a deep breath. "Because the world isn't always kind to people who don't fit neatly into boxes," I said. "Because I didn't know if I would be loved, or even accepted, for who I really am." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I can't imagine what that's like. But I'm glad you trusted me. I want to help, not judge." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of years I had carried alone. That night, we talked for hours about my fears, my experiences, my hidden moments of joy and self-expression. And for the first time, I felt a sense of unity, a bridge being built across the gap of years spent hiding. But life didn't stop testing me. A few weeks later, an incident at work reminded me how fragile acceptance could be. I had worn a subtle outfit that reflected my true self, careful not to be overt. But a coworker, someone I had trusted, saw me by chance. The look in their eyes was not cruel, but confused, wary. The whispers began, faint at first, then louder. I felt exposed again, 10 years of secrecy returning in an instant. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor. I considered giving up, retreating back into the shadows. But then I thought of my friend, my sister, the people who had seen me and still cared. I thought of the dress on the chair, the makeup, the small rituals that had saved me in moments of despair. And I realized something. Hiding had protected me, yes, but it had also stolen life from me. Courage wasn't just about showing others, it was about showing myself. I returned to work the next day, holding my head high, walking with a confidence I had once thought impossible. I answered questions honestly when asked, and when whispers followed, I ignored them. The world wasn't perfect, but my truth was my armor. And slowly, the ripple effect began. People who had doubted or feared my difference began to see me not as a secret, not as an anomaly, but as a human being. Friendships grew stronger, some relationships transformed, and I even found new connections, people who resonated with my experience, people who had also lived in shadows, waiting for someone to step into the light first. One evening, standing in front of the mirror after a long day, I realized how far I had come. The emerald dress I had hidden for 10 years now felt like a trophy of survival. I smiled at my reflection, tracing the line of my jaw, the curve of my shoulders, the hair falling around my face. "This is me," I whispered. "And I'm not afraid anymore." The journey wasn't just about clothes or appearances, it was about identity, about reclaiming a life I had almost surrendered to fear. It was about understanding that acceptance starts within, that courage can be as quiet as a whisper, and as loud as stepping out into the world fully seen. I want people to hear this, to understand that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, shape us, but they don't define the entirety of who we are. Life is about peeling back layers, facing fear, and discovering the freedom that comes from living authentically. 10 years of hiding taught me that, but being exposed taught me more, that love, acceptance, and understanding are possible, and that vulnerability is not weakness, it is strength. Now, I share my story not as a confession, but as a beacon. To anyone who feels trapped in a secret life, who fears judgment, who doubts if they can ever be seen, you can. It will be scary, messy, unpredictable. But the moment you embrace your truth, you reclaim not just your identity, but your joy. And when I finally stepped outside one quiet evening, dressed exactly as I wanted, the sunset painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. People passed by, some smiled, some didn't notice, but none of it mattered. For the first time in 10 years, I was fully, unapologetically, beautifully me. And in that moment, I understood, the secret I had hidden for a decade wasn't a shame, it was a journey. A journey that had tested me, terrified me, and ultimately transformed me into someone stronger, braver, and more alive than I had ever imagined.